To his family, he was a devoted husband and a loving father. To his neighbors, a respected local businessman. He built a fortune, raised 3 children, and lived on a sprawling, idyllic estate. But beneath the pristine surface of this perfect life, a monstrous secret festered. Along the desolate stretches of America's highways, he was something else entirely. A predator, believed to be the killer known as the I-70 Strangler. This is the chilling story of how a man who seemed to have everything was hiding a terrifying double life in plain sight, and how he allegedly carried out a decade-long reign of terror before simply changing his hunting grounds. Interstate 70. It's one of the great arteries of the American Midwest, a ribbon of asphalt stretching from Utah to Maryland. It's a symbol of connection, a pathway for millions of people heading home, going on vacation, or chasing a dream. But between 1980 and 1991, this lifeline became a trail of terror. A shadow fell over Indiana and Ohio as a killer began stalking the areas around the interstate. He targeted young men and boys, luring them from the vibrant nightlife of Indianapolis before extinguishing their lives and leaving them in the lonely, forgotten places along the highway. He became known as the I-70 Strangler, a phantom who left behind a dozen victims and almost no clues. But what makes this case so profoundly disturbing isn't just the brutality of the crimes. It's the man investigators believe was responsible. This wasn't some shadowy drifter. Police believe the killer was a man hiding in the open, a respected, married businessman who compartmentalized his life so completely that no one suspected the monster lurking just beneath the surface. This is a story about a horrifying double life, a community gripped by fear, and a mystery that, for a time, seemed destined to remain unsolved. The nightmare began on a summer day in June 1980. The body of 15-year-old Michael Petrie was found in a rural part of Hamilton County, Indiana. He was discovered naked, and the cause of death was strangulation by ligature. Michael was known to frequent the gay bar scene in Indianapolis and was reportedly involved in sex work to survive. His disappearance a week earlier was alarming, but some witnesses had seen him in a stranger's car just days before his body was found, seemingly unharmed. His death was a horrific tragedy, but at the time, it was an isolated incident. It wasn't yet a pattern. That would change. 2 years later, the killer surfaced again. In July 1982, the body of 23-year-old Maurice Taylor was found in a creek, also in rural Hamilton County. He too had been strangled. As the 80s wore on, the list of victims grew with sickening regularity. Young men, often connected to the gay bars in a specific 4-block radius of Indianapolis, would vanish, only for their bodies to be discovered discarded in ditches, rivers, and empty fields along the I-70 corridor. The victims were almost always found naked or partially clothed, and all had been strangled to death. There was Delvoyd Lee Baker, a 14-year-old 8th grader. There was 21-year-old James Robbins. In total, authorities would link at least 12 murders to this single, unidentified killer. A deep and chilling fear began to permeate the community. The vibrant nightlife that had once felt like a safe haven now felt menacing, charged with a terrifying uncertainty. A predator was moving among them, a ghost who selected his victims with cold precision. He would then use the vast, anonymous network of the interstate to dump their bodies and melt back into the night. Police knew they had a serial killer on their hands, but they had no idea who they were looking for. The descriptions they managed to gather were vague and often contradictory. The only clear picture they had was of the young lives he left shattered in his wake. As investigators frantically tried to piece the puzzle together, a profile of their phantom killer began to emerge. He seemed to exclusively target young men, many of whom were gay and sometimes living on the fringes of society. And tragically, in the cultural climate of the 1980s that made the investigation incredibly difficult. There was an immense social stigma around the gay community, and law enforcement struggled to gain the trust of potential witnesses. Many were terrified to come forward, fearful of being outed, judged, or even implicated themselves. This wall of silence created a deadly shield for the killer. It gave him a horrifying amount of freedom to cruise the bars, pick his victims, and lure them away to their deaths. What happened in their final moments is a matter of grim speculation, but it always ended the same way, with a life cut short and a body left by the highway. With almost no physical evidence, investigators had to rely on criminal profiling. The portrait they painted was of a man who was a master of deception. They believed the I-70 Strangler was a white male, likely in his 40s during the murder spree, well-respected, and probably married with a family. This was the core of the double life theory, a man presenting a facade of absolute normalcy to the world, while secretly harboring violent, homicidal urges born from a deep-seated self-loathing. Investigators theorized this man was a deeply closeted homosexual, consumed by an internal conflict that twisted into a violent rage directed at the very men he was secretly attracted to. He would seek them out, engage with them, and then, in a final, brutal act of denial, he would erase them. But a profile is not a suspect. The investigation stalled. The killings continued sporadically until 1991, and then they just stopped. The trail went ice cold. The Strangler vanished, leaving behind more than a dozen unsolved murders and a chilling question. Did he die, get locked up for another crime, or did he just stop, living out his days with his monstrous secrets intact? The idea that a serial killer could simply decide to stop and blend back into society is one of the most frightening aspects of this case. For years, it seemed the mystery of the I-70 Strangler would remain frozen in time, a cold case haunting two states. But then, a new name emerged, a name that would cast a horrifying new light on the entire investigation. We're going to get into that prime suspect, a man with $1 million estate and a basement full of mannequins, right after this. But first, if you find these deep dives into unsolved mysteries as compelling as we do, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. In 1996, 5 years after the last known I-70 Strangler murder, the name Herb Baumeister exploded into the headlines. On the surface, Baumeister was the very picture of success. He was a married father of 3, the founder of the popular Save-A-Lot thrift store chain, and lived on a sprawling 18-acre estate in Westfield, Indiana, called Fox Hollow Farm. He was, by all appearances, the respectable family man from the FBI's profile. But Herb Baumeister was living a deep, dark double life. When his wife and kids were out of town, he would adopt the alias Brian Smart, cruise gay bars in Indianapolis, and bring men back to his massive estate. The first crack in his facade appeared in 1995, when a man who had met Brian went to the police. He told them a terrifying story, claiming that Smart had tried to murder him during an autoerotic asphyxiation act gone wrong. That man led police straight to Herb Baumeister. At first, Baumeister and his wife refused to let investigators search the property. But by June of 1996, his wife, Julie, had become terrified. Herb's behavior was growing more erratic, and her son had made a gruesome discovery in their yard: human bones. She filed for divorce and, while Herb was away, finally consented to a search. What investigators found at Fox Hollow Farm was a graveyard. They unearthed over 10,000 charred, crushed, and scattered human bone fragments. The remains belonged to at least 11 men, though some authorities believe the total number of victims could be as high as 25. These were men who had vanished in the mid-1990s, after the I-70 Strangler had supposedly stopped his spree. As the net closed in, Herb Baumeister fled to Canada. On July 3, 1996, he shot himself, leaving behind a suicide note that spoke of a failing marriage and business, but never once mentioned the thousands of bone fragments littering his property. For many investigators, the connection to the I-70 Strangler case was impossible to ignore. Baumeister fit the profile perfectly. He was a closeted gay man who frequented the same bars as the early victims. And most tellingly, the I-70 murders, which involved dumping bodies along the highway, stopped around 1991. That was the year Baumeister bought Fox Hollow Farm, giving him the perfect private, secluded burial ground. The theory is that he didn't stop killing. He just changed his method of disposal. Despite the powerful circumstantial evidence, no physical proof has ever definitively linked Baumeister to the I-70 Strangler victims. He was never tried, and his suicide left a universe of questions unanswered. While he is the prime suspect, the I-70 Strangler case remains officially unsolved. To this day, coroners are still working to identify the thousands of bone fragments from his property, with a new victim, Daniel Thomas Halloran, being identified as recently as 2025 thanks to advances in DNA technology. The case of the I-70 Strangler is a chilling study in duality, a story about the abyss of secrets that can fester behind a mask of suburban normalcy. Herb Baumeister presented himself as a successful businessman, a husband, and a father. But in the shadows, he was a predator, and his beautiful estate was a field of horrors. His story is eerily similar to those of other respected figures who were unmasked as monsters, like decorated Canadian Air Force Colonel Russell Williams, who was also a serial rapist and murderer leading a shocking double life. These cases force us to confront an unsettling truth, that the monsters among us might not be lurking in the dark, but living right next door. Their public lives a carefully constructed alibi for their private atrocities. Our nation's interstates connect us, but they also offer anonymity and a quick escape. The I-70 corridor wasn't just the Strangler's hunting ground. It was also the backdrop for a separate, unsolved crime spree by a man dubbed the I-70 Killer, who shot 6 store clerks in 1992. That case also remains a mystery, a completely different nightmare tied to the same stretch of road. The identity of the I-70 Strangler, whether it was Herb Baumeister or someone else, remains one of the Midwest's most haunting questions. It's a terrifying reminder that evil can wear a friendly face, and that a man can live 2 lives at once, one in the light and one in the deepest, darkest corners of the human soul. Was Baumeister responsible for all of the killings? Or is it possible the real I-70 Strangler was never caught? Let me know your theories down in the comments.
Like and subscribe.